The real first surfers in Pensacola were Navy guys, no doubt, that had been to Hawaii or been to California, come here for flight training or just to be stationed here, and had brought their boards with them, showed up at the beach. Nobody really sort of noticed that. I think that was like, they'd go out one day and, nobody would see them. But one day, a Navy flyer named Jim Myring brought his board to the beach in the summer, surfed out in front of the casino where the lifeguard stands were, and the lifeguards noticed him surfing and got all excited watching him surf, decided that would be a good thing to do.
Well, what brought me out was at the time I was a lifeguard, and I was the first guard to go on duty that year, and it was around the 16th, 17th of April, because that's when they used to open the beach. And of course it was still pretty chilly, so there was nobody on the beach, and I was sitting there one afternoon getting ready to shut the beach all by myself. I was going to close it down, and I heard a noise, and I looked down, and here was this guy dragging an 11.5-foot solid balsa with fiberglass tandem Hobie surfboard. I watched him paddle out to the second bar and caught about 3 waves and came back in because it was not that good. It was closing out. And I didn't know what closing out meant at the time, but I met him when he came out of the water and offered to pay him to teach me to do what I saw him just do, because I'd never seen anyone surf. And he kind of laughed and he said, "No, if you're interested, I'll teach you."
The 70s this was kind of the ghetto. I mean, this wasn't the place where everybody wanted to be. It was kind of a rundown place, and we kind of felt at home with that. I grew up downtown, it was kind of run down, so it kind of felt like the right place to be, and didn't know if I could ever do that surfing part, but I liked being part of the whole scene.
My dad moved around corporately during the early 60s, late 50s, and we came here every summer to be with the family, and all my cousins had surfboards, and so we'd surf in the summer here on the beach. When the summer came, I came back over here and bought a 9.6 Hudson at a pawn shop, so I had a real board.
I first came out and I saw this kid, Yancy, on a board, and he was doing some really phenomenal stuff. And I thought, hey, you know what, that looks like fun. I'd like to try that. So I went to Hudson Surf Shop on New Warrington Road, and they had a Surfboards Hawaii. It was a 65, 66 model, I guess. And a step deck, and it was just a sweet little board. I loved it. 9.6. I think I paid $125 for it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun back then. I remember seeing Yancy do a fin first takeoff one time. And I looked at my brother and a couple other guys that we were with, and I said, "That guy's going somewhere, you watch." And sure enough, Yancy was everything. I mean, he and Beezer and Buddy Capel and Herb Turner, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And here I am, almost 64 years old and still doing it. I love it.
My dad loved this place. He came here back in the mid and late 30s. And literally we spent all of our vacation time here. We stayed in the state park. My dad taught me how to body surf when I was 2, 3, 4 years old.
I saw a movie when I was about 8 or 9, and it was called Ride the Wild Surf. And I saw those guys riding waves in Hawaii and went, that's what I'm gonna do.
I started surfing when I was 13, and this was the main place to surf. And we knew every car that pulled up in the parking lot. If the guy had racks on, we knew who he was. We would actually, especially in the winter when the waves were here, they weren't much in the summer, we would build giant fires right here on the beach, stand around in our little wetsuits, because all you had was kind of like tank top wetsuits, till we warmed up by the fire, back in the water, come back in. If the surf was really big, we'd sneak around the pier, which was locked in the winter, the main entryway, and dive off the pier, throw our boards off, jump off, and that's what we did.
When I started surfing, I was young, and of course, we all looked up to the older surfers. They wouldn't really have much to do with us. We were just kooks to them because we didn't know how to surf, but we wanted to learn, so we just kept doing it.
Well, the allure for me was I was too small to play football. They didn't have soccer, and I was kind of a goofy short kid with braces. So the only way I could think of to meet girls was to become a surfer. One of my buddies got me into it, And I had the good fortune of getting right in with a lot of these really good surfers right off the bat.
By 1971, I was driving back here with a trailer full of 50 blanks, a drum of resin. Yancy would find me a place, and he would have orders to fill 50 boards, and I would spend 6 weeks shaping 50 pretty much custom boards for an individual and make them a board right here on the spot from start to finish. And I always look forward every year to coming down here because it was just such a surf stoke. And that was when Yancy had a shop about the size of the canopy that we're under, and it would be loaded with used boards, and every day he'd unlock the shop, stick them around the outside of the shop so you could get in to buy wax. I think his rent was probably $50 a month.
There's a huge sand dune in Fort Walton called the Matterhorn, and everybody got into sand skiing. We take an old water ski and wax the bottom of it and cruise down. It was kind of like surfing, you know. And my sister's boyfriends, they were all surfing, you know, so I kind of got the bug.
And we'd travel up and down this little stretch of beach from really from the point to Panama City, depending on the way the swell was coming.
You know, when you came out to Pensacola Beach before, it was quite sparse out here. You had the old cinder blocks mainly.
You know, when we started surfing here, there was nobody else surfing, and so we surfed wherever we wanted. You know, we'd surf right in the middle of all the people swimming in the middle of the summer, and you know, we would spend the night at the beach in the parking lot to go surfing the next day, and you'd actually have to call somebody up to find them to go surfing with you if the surf was big, because there was, you'd be lucky if anybody was out at the beach.
You come to Pensacola, beautiful water like in a swimming pool, the white sand beach. I get pictures and they go, "What, you're back there surfing in the snow without a wetsuit on?" I go, "That's the sand in Pensacola Beach, beautiful." And then the waves are, they're small, but they're real feisty, they're hard driven, they're powerful. They come out of the deep water and break on sandbars really hard. So it's a unique area.
We didn't have cars, we were too young. We were beach kids, different lifestyle. City kids had to come out here and we didn't have to go over there. It's kind of that way now. No one wants to cross the bridge.
And then when we did come out here, it was whoever had the car with that could fit 5 or 6 guys in it, because we always came in a group, and we would go out here and participate maybe in one of the fires that was down there by the cross area. And that's when you had the multiple dunes. There was a row. There was one right by the road, then there was the valley, and then another dune, and that was, it was just such a, it was almost a surreal atmosphere down there with what was there and what's not there now.
When we moved here in the late 60s, I would say there were maybe 150 families that lived on the beach year-round, maybe. A lot of the houses were used for tourists that would come in during the season. So many of the houses stayed vacant during the wintertime, and they were rented out week by week during the summer. Then during the spring, and especially during the summer, it would be like wall-to-wall people. Traffic would be the worst thing, because at that time there was only 2 lanes going back and forth all the way down the beach.
Back then we had no problems at all. We could park anywhere. There wasn't a no parking sign anywhere on Pensacola Beach. You could park anywhere on Pensacola Beach on the side of the road because there were oyster shell aprons to facilitate parking. The biggest building on the beach was 2 stories, and that was the fire station. The cop shop was about as big as this shop. There was 2 cops on duty. One of them didn't have a car. It was pretty low key. A lot more low key and kickback than it is now.
My dad he got to travel with Sean Thompson and Bobby Owens and a lot of the real legends of the sport. And when I was a kid, I guess this is the best story I could tell. Nat Young came and stayed at our house, and Nat Young knew of my father, wanted to see him. So here was one of the first world champs from Australia. Nat Young was considered a god in Australia. Him and Midget Farrelly were the first world champion, and Nat Young changed surfing as far as going to shortboard surfing. So I knew as a kid that how special he was and what an effect he had on surf history. I mean, Nat Young is one of the forefathers of surf everything. And so I went to school, I was like, Nat Young stayed at my house, and they were just like, who's that? I was like, yeah, it's Nat Young. And so, after that, there was just a lot of neat things. I'd go around the world and meet Shane Horan, and he'd want to meet my dad, or Joey Baran would want to meet my dad. And so I realized that, surfing was so big from 60s into 70s that it just exploded. It trickled down into the 80s to where guys around the world still knew of guys from the Gulf Coast.
Fu was a show out, and he really liked to see how close he could get to you without actually running you over. And he was too close, and so I tell him a lot of times, one day you're going to hit me and it's going to be bad. And one day he did hit me, and he wouldn't apologize. He said he ran over my foot, hurt it really bad as I was diving under, avoiding him. So on the way home, he still wouldn't apologize. So on the way home, I stopped the car, there was other kids in the car, and I said, get out. And he's like, get out, no, get out. And so the kids shoved him out, and we left him, made him walk all the way back to his house. We did get an apology, but I called him years later, because when he left here, he said, next time you'll see me, you'll be on the cover of Surfer magazine. And that was Mark. And we all laughed, bye Mark, and he left. And sure enough, next time we saw him, he was on the cover of 2 magazines.
Well, now that the statute of limitations is up on a lot of that stuff, here on Pensacola Beach, there was just a real colorful crew. The Woods brothers, they were dominated and pretty heavy. The Spencer brothers. There was the Shofs. They were really gnarly guys. Steve Shof and Brad Shof, and those guys were pretty scary guys. And Scott Bush, he was a real pioneer surfer guy here that made boards, had a shop, and he was the guy that kind of gave Yancy a ride to the beach when he was a Grom. And so Scott was our friend, and he was a pretty dominant presence at that time. And there were kids like Jerry Babin. His parents owned the dunes down here, and so he had a front row seat, and he was a naturally gifted surfer, and we all just loved to watch him surf. And then Beezer Turner and his brother, they had a place down there, Herb, down the beach here, and their parents came down from Memphis back in the 50s, and his dad made him a board, made it for himself, like Popular Mechanics had a surf plan in it, and so he made a board, and those kids took it away from him, and they became really good surfers before the surf boom began, so they were ahead of the curve.
And we heard rumors that Sean Thompson was coming over, going to surf the waves and Gulf shores. And we're surfing, and we got there bright and early, and the sun just it's about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we're surfing and catching a bunch of waves, and about 8:30, here comes this crew over the hill. Me and Mark was like, this is a secret spot. Here's 12 young kids coming over the hill, and then behind them is a grown-up. With, and Mark goes, man, that's Sean Thompson. I'm like, sure enough. So Sean paddles out, surfs with us, and surfs and hoots it up about how great we were catching the waves. I don't know who he was looking at, because we weren't doing that great. But anyway, we got some pictures of it, and then we went back on the beach. We surfed there for a little while and went back on the beach. And Sean got out of the water, came over, sat down on our little towels and stuff we had, and had his sunglasses sitting there. And I was wondering where those nice Wayfarers came from, and they were his. And I was admiring them, and I had a little cheap pair or whatever I was wearing then. But he goes, man, here, it was fun catching waves with you. Give you these. He gave me his Wayfarers. What a great! I was like. Mark's looking at me like, you dog, man. Why didn't he give them to me? I was catching better waves than you. But anyway, that was just a great experience there. And also another guy showed up at the same time. His name was Jerry Lambert. He was a little surfer boy from Innerarity Point. and he was a major ripper in this area. And he was, you know, a teenager at that little above 20, I think, maybe, somewhere in there. But he was a very good, probably could have been a professional. But things just didn't work out. And unfortunately, Jerry had gotten a place down in Mexico at one of the breaks down there, and was building a house down there, going to have a surf camp. But down in that neck of the woods, it's a little rough. And unfortunately, Jerry disappeared in Mexico. You know, that little guy, he was something special. He was a great surfer boy. He was a great little person, and do anything for you. Never had any money. Slept on my floor all the time. And of course, his brother Tommy Lambert was a real good friend of mine and real good surfer too in his day. And he was someone special. And unfortunately, he disappeared in Mexico, and to this day, nobody knows what took place down there.
Yancy was 2.5 years older than me, and he started surfing and forced me actually to get into surfing because he didn't want to hitchhike to the beach by himself. So I became his hitchhike buddy, which drew me into surfing. But from the very beginning, Yancy had this passion to surf. I mean, it was like we both grew up playing city league baseball, football, and I was still playing football when Yancy got into surfing, and he used to just hassle me about it. John, you can't play football anymore, you got to surf. And so everything became surfing. He kept a journal. Every night he'd write in it how big the surf was, who surfed, who didn't surf. I mean, you could look at his calendar, 1/2 foot choppy, 3 foot choppy, 4 foot today, got the best tube ride I ever got in my life, going to Cocoa Beach for Christmas. I mean, once Yancy got into surfing, really nothing else captivated him like it. And everyone around him that he could get into surfing, he did.
There was very few girls surfing around here, but there was one in particular that I remember. Her name was Sharon Kane, and she just happened to have died last year at about 64 years of age. And John Russell, who does our surf report here, actually mentioned it in one of his little blurbs, and they were probably about the same age. Because like John Russell, his first board was a Hudson, and so was her first board.
One of the biggest influences was Yancy Spencer. Not only did he make an influence here in this community, just surfing and being a model, a great model to the youth, but also spiritually, all right? Giving others light, giving them hope through the gospel. That made a big impact on me.
His body frame was somewhat designed for surfing. He was thin, he was light, and he wasn't a good football player. He'd get killed, although he was fine at it, but he couldn't excel at basketball. He was too short. He really had the body frame for football. But once he got into surfing, he realized this is something I can do, and I can do it well, and he just went after it. And I think it had a lot of things to do with the time of culture, the era, the whole burgeoning thing of surfing, and just that Yancy clicked with it, and he saw a future in it, and he really went after it.
A lot of their first exposure to California with the surfboards that were brought here by people in the Navy. And you know, I'm sure those guys got here thinking, there's no surf in the Gulf, I'm getting exiled to the Gulf Coast, and then they find out there's waves, then they're down here surfing, and they probably had a lot of influence on the younger guys that were just starting to surf.
So when we actually started making boards, our deficiency was simply that we hadn't done it, but we had reasonable resins, and we got Clark foam from California and all of that, and we set up a surf shop and just started making boards like they were making out there.
I chose building surfboards as my profession because it gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and not plug into the machine, just work for an hourly wage, which at the time I started building surfboards was like $2.25 an hour, which it really wasn't that attractive. Of course, back then, gas was like 50 cents, 60 cents a gallon. Now I'm doing everything, and the reason that I'm here doing what I'm doing is to facilitate others that know how to make surfboards, to give them a place to do it. And people that want to learn how to make surfboards, I teach them how to do it and give them a place where they can practice, because it's all about practice. You just got to do it, do it, do it. If you don't do it, you're just talking about it.
We were making boards with no stringers, long boards, you know, where you depended upon the flex to create the pocket, to give you the nose ride. The Model A's, I've shaped those Model A's with the offset stringers, and the boards were pretty well planned out. I think nowadays you don't have to plan a board as much. You can put weird ideas into it, but if you've got something that's only 5 feet long, there's only so much of that board that can really function.
Then all of a sudden all boards started being accepted again. You know, people started riding fishes and all these different shapes evolved, and so that's just been the neatest thing to me growing up in surfing, is to see everything explode and grow and then all evolve and then come back and get all fine-tuned, and now everyone knows exactly what will work for what type of wave. And you know, now you can go and you can see a wave and you know what type of board is going to work in that wave. You're not just stuck riding something or think you have to follow the trend, or you know, because I remember in the 80s, if you didn't have the right sponsor and the right shaper, you weren't even, oh, he's a kook or he's not a surfer, you know. And so, you know, now everything's accepted, which is pretty cool.
The very first Velcro ankle leash was made in Panama City Beach, Florida, on a bench in front of a motel called Frank C's. And Dave Brown and Frank Brown made it. And the pilot saw me sitting out there making ankle leashes. He said, man, I got something for you guys. So the next day came by and he brought us a box of Velcro, and it had top secret written all over it. Because our pilots used it in their flight suits, and the Russians and the Chinese and everybody else still had buckles and belts, and they were strapping themselves in, and we had flight suits with Velcro. So I went to Surf Hut at 12 and 13 years old, and I was going in there and I wanted to sell these new ankle leashes to the Surf Hut for what they were retailing the other ones for, which was about $250, $275. There was a gentleman there, who was a salesman from California. Don't remember his name, too young, all that. Didn't know anything about patents. But I tell you what, if I had $1 for every ankle leash that was ever made, Dave and I both would be living in Hawaii right now.
The jokes were the vans, you know, the surf vans. We had a surf van. You know, what went on in the surf van stayed in the surf van.
One time when we were in high school, there was a guy that surfed with us. He had this little white Volkswagen Bug, and he was always cutting us off. He's kind of a kook, and he was trying to fit in, you know. So naturally, we always tortured him. So one time while he was out surfing, we ran just a wire with 2 clips on it from his coil to the springs underneath his car seat. And his car seat was kind of worn out, and he'd always plop down in it wet. And we all stand there watching him put his board on top of his car and hit the key. Got a big jolt, kind of dented the top of his car, I think. And he kept hitting that key, boy. He was just determined that he was going to start that car.
The funniest thing I remember that we had a buddy of ours named Hal McClellan and Terry McClellan. They came up from South Florida, moved up here, had an old 56 Cadillac, and we had like 6 lawnmowers, I mean missiles on the top. We had a bunch of old wore out Aloha racks on it. We came flying up to the county pier, and we had this habit of slamming on brakes, and he slammed on brakes, and I remember 6 longboards going over the front of the car and off the side of the pier down to the beach. And thank goodness nobody was coming up the sand. They'd been killed.
One summer when there was no surf, group got together and decided it was time to sacrifice something to the surf gods to bring the surf up. So actually went and got that yellow board and took it out to the beach. The wind was howling out of the north, and poured gasoline on it, set it on fire, and launched it out to the surf gods. So the original, you know, Pensacola Beach surfboard went sailing out into the Gulf of Mexico ablaze to try to bring the surf up. So that, but, you know, and that's what it's like to be a surfer, right there. Is that, you know, anything for surf.
Came out, people would call the surf shop and go, "Hey, what's the Amazons like?" And I'd go, "Oh my God, you guys won't believe it. The Army Corps engineers went in there and dredged the sandbar out. They dredged the pass for the shipping lanes, and it's gone. Sorry." That place holds 15 people, 5 on the outside, 10 on the inside break. Last time I surfed it, there was 187 people in the water, and it was like bowling for surfers, and it was dangerous.
Back then, shark bites were not even heard of. You would get bumped maybe by a shark in the early spring when the mothers were coming in to have the pups. You know, you'd see, oh my gosh, a litter of pups, and you'd go, oh my God, these are sharks. And so that was kind of scary, but you never heard of shark bites.
Well, if you want to drown, this is a good place to do it because this water here will kill you in a heartbeat. There's no games about the surf in the Gulf. It comes up suddenly, and it can be horrendous in no time, and then it can just be gone in no time. We have some awesome surf, awesome breaks. It's tough to surf, very tough to surf, and I've always said you could surf this. You learn to catch these waves, surf this. You go with us easy, nice swell, you can surf anything. I'm not saying you can surf the biggest wave in the world, but you can catch it. You know, it's a great place to learn to surf. It's a great place to learn to respect the ocean and know your limitations.
Surfers were not looked upon as anything more than just beach bums because everyone's mind, they only knew that when there was surf, that's all we wanted, so they thought that's all we did. They didn't realize we had a life outside of surfing. You go to the local Chick-fil-A or fast food place, they'd look at, you know, they're gonna scrape up the money out of their ashtrays and, you know, pay in pennies, and, you know, they're not gonna tip, so they weren't real warm to surfers to come in.
The authorities constantly gave the surfers a hard time for surfing too close, getting entangled up with the fishermen's lines, and just generally trying to stop them from what they call shooting the pier, which is going through the pilings.
Out here have always been the conflict between the surfers and the fishermen. You know, as you get older, you respect the fishermen a little more. But we've always, I guess every old seasoned surfer has always seen the fisherman that slings the lead at the surfer. And when you're young, you cuss the fishermen and they cuss you back. And as you get older, you respect their right to fish there. You know, and we hope that they respect our rights a little bit, even though they do pay to fish. The waves don't real often break by a pier.
We were out surfing by the pier. The surf was really nice, and you know, we would keep getting closer and closer to the pier, and the fishermen are out there in the springtime trying to catch ling. And if the ling aren't running, they get all frustrated, and they think it's the surfer's fault that you know, they're not catching any fish. So
the break by the pier was pretty good because they changed. One side of the pier be one way, one of the other be another way, and no matter what side we were on, that's where they want to throw those lures and actually lead sinkers. And I imagine if you ever got hit by one, you'd be pretty upset.
One day, this fisherman threw this line, threw the lure right over the guy's board. And the guy grabs the line, snaps the line, paddles in, walks up on the pier, grabs the guy's tackle box and just threw it off the pier and told the guy that if he gave him any hassle, he would throw him off the pier.
A lot of the guys would take nail clippers and they would paddle out because, you know, the fishermen would sling pyramid triangles and lead sinkers and stuff at you. And you could see the lines coming across the water and kind of shining. We'd just kind of paddle by and clip all their lines, and of course then they would just start flinging them by hand as opposed to aiming for you and trying to hit you with their fishing poles.
But we knew the law, so the law helped us out. They didn't put us in jail. We stole a car out here one night and got caught. No big deal. You know, the guy just, well, the two guys that were driving that night, Louis Davis was our friend. And he was a deputy sheriff. We didn't have any police out there other than the sheriff's department. Louis came and got them. They were real drunk and took them into town. They He had to go all the way to Pensacola to go to the jail, left him in the jail overnight. He came back to the beach, talked the guy out of pressing charges. You know, the guy had his car stolen. And then the next morning, they just let him out.
Surfing is one of the few things that we can do that is real.
It's the only place you can go where you're absolutely on your own. It's all about you and the surf and just living. And the idea of being able to move from this spot to that spot, just standing up and just feeling, it's just nature.
And it's just you and the water. It's just you and the ocean. And that, to me, was really, really special. And when I couldn't get it anywhere else. Could get it nowhere on the land. Everything on the land was what I went surfing to get away from.
When I first started surfing, it was because it looked neat, something to do. And I'd been a model airplane builder, I've had model trains, I'm a hunter, a fisherman, all those things. But the thing that's lasted the longest in my whole entire life was surfing.
We all flopped around in the whitewater and had a good time, but the first time I actually stood up on an open wave, a face of a wave, and traveled in a certain direction and didn't fall off, I knew it pretty much that was going to be it.
The first few times I went, I actually stood up on a longboard, had that feeling of, wow, this is awesome, I'm going to do this forever.
Surfing something, you can look down the beach 100 yards or more and see people in the water. You might not be able to see who they are, but because of their style, you know who they are. It's a definite art form.
I mean, I can be 500 miles inland and just speak 3 words to somebody and go, you grew up around the water. And they're the same way.
Growing up, everyone I knew surfed, okay? Everybody bought a surfboard. You buy surfboard, you buy wax, you buy bathing suit, you buy all the gear that goes with it. It was such a part of the lifestyle here on the Gulf Coast.
We just, you know, everybody had vans and surfboards were all going short then, and so it was a pretty experimental time.
And we were kind of looked at as weird because you weren't a jock, you weren't a football player, you weren't in that whole niche, which was what high school was all about. And, but yet we did have sort of a mystique about us, you know. And we were pretty much accepted, but we weren't totally in with the high school crew because we did a whole different thing.
Because I was kind of a nerdy kid and you know, didn't run with the popular group at school and that kind of thing. I was in the band and all those things. When I started surfing, that completely changed. So my senior year in high school, I went from being a band geek you know, in my sophomore and junior year to being a surfer in my senior year, and all of a sudden I was kind of cool then.
Yeah, they were like free-spirited. They, the guys had long hair. They just were the type that didn't fit into your traditional mold.
The culture was the 60s. I mean, you know, it was long hair, puka shells, surfing, drugs, all that kind of stuff going on. But it was very small in this area, the surf culture, because there weren't a lot of surfers.
Well, we were all pretty wild. It was kind of the change of the culture, you know. The Vietnam thing was been happening and all the long hair, sex, drugs, and rock and roll was going on. So we were all pretty much the beginning wave of that. So everybody was pretty wild. And
a lot of parties, probably more now than it was back then, but you know, we had a good time. We had a real good time.
We spent a lot of time having fun because it's flat here a lot, and so we devoted a lot of time to hedonistic pursuits.
There were fights, there were typical local wars between people, but just the funny, I think surfers have a tendency to act a fool because they're stoked, they do something that a lot of people don't really understand what we do, and it puts us in a crazy mood, and sometimes you blow off steam and sometimes you celebrate, you know. We
would hang out together, we'd party together. Scott and I used to sleep at the beach in our cars, just at the foot of the pier, just hope that the surf would be up, you know, the next day.
Yeah, if you wanted to go surfing, you go surfing. If you want to go to work, you go to work. Here, if you wanted to go surfing, you had to be ready to go surfing
when Mother Nature provided the swell in the Gulf. You had to turn away from the girlfriend and go to the beach and go surfing with the guys when the waves were better. Even if there wasn't a family event, you know, sorry Aunt and Uncle, the waves are up today. I've got to get it while I can.
In this area, it was just surf when you could, because the waves are totally wind driven, as you know, unless there's a hurricane or a low out there.
You go surfing at Pensacola Beach? I've never seen it. Well, yeah, because you always go when the sun shines. You know, we get surf in the Gulf when the weather's bad, typically, you know. So nobody ever knew there actually were waves there.
The biggest time of the year that I remember of that surfing was at its peak was right around hurricane season. Most people would evacuate the beach, but the surfers, they would come onto the beach.
But as soon as that front would hit and the wind would go offshore, you rode those waves from overhead. And the funny thing about around here, it wasn't 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, it was chest high, waist high, knee high, ankle high, you know, half a shin high. And you would ride those waves all the way down until they just lapped on the shore and there was no more waves to ride.
When we got driver's license, we would get up before daylight, come home at dark. That was our scene. And we surfed the Destin jetties. We surfed, when I got a little older and discovered Pensacola, we surfed the bay a lot.
But the really cool thing about the Panhandle of Florida is wherever you live, you're 10 minutes from a good wave. If you're on the East Coast, it's blown out. The West Coast is blown out. It's blown out everywhere. You have to travel and go get behind the point someplace. You got to travel hours. Here, it's 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't matter what the swell direction is here, what the wind direction is. In 15 minutes, 10 minutes, you can be surfing good waves and overhead.
Watching surfing grow from just, you know, you go to the beach, if there's waves, you surf. If there isn't, you go home to, you know, all the technology and all the growth of the sport and women surfing. I mean, I was kind of, you know, new to it when I was a kid. If we heard a girl was surfing, we'd ask why, you know, why are they surfing? And so when, you know, all these girls started surfing, after I got out of high school, I was pretty stoked to see all the Lisa Andersons and all, you know, the great girl surfers come out and just really dominate. So
there weren't any women surfing. I was pretty much the only one. I would surf in the men's divisions just to get points, and then, you know, you'd go move up the coast. Back then they didn't have regionals. There weren't that many people, so we'd go from districts, the southern districts to the central districts to the northern districts. A couple of us kind of put things together and started having contests. I think our first contest was maybe about 10 people, basically some of my friends and a couple other people, and we just said we're going to get this started, and then eventually it kind of grew and grew. One of my reasons to surfing contests was to actually just have a reason to travel and go somewhere. It always gave an opportunity for that, and to surf a nice break with just a few people out. So,
all right, my sister Carol Snodgrass, who still lives in this area, she was a competitive surfer, and she as well, she was in the water all the time. Didn't matter what the temperature was. If it was cold enough to wear a wetsuit, she was all geared up and out in the water. And one of her good surfing buddies, who was also a competitive surfer, was Tina Wood. And the two of those girls, along with other women too, were some of the first female surfers in this area who really just took to the sport and became very skillful at surfing.
I'm really proud to be part of the East Coast Surfing Hall of Fame. I was inducted in January, on Friday the 13th, 2012. I mean, I never expected anything like that growing up, you know, thinking, oh, someday I'll be in the Hall of Fame, or, you know, we're surfers. We just live day to day and go surfing.
It took a little while for, you know, for the sport to really sort of catch on. There was a little tight group of about, as I said, maybe by 1960, late 1961, 1962, probably about 10 people max that surfed here. Like I said, it was hard to find somebody to go surfing with.
There was some, you know, that thought it was, this ain't gonna last. You know, there was a couple of kids that I used to surf with in high school, and I remember being a sophomore in high school, and a couple of guys said, you know, that's not gonna last around here. The waves aren't big enough, you know? If you want some real surf, you need to go either California, Hawaii, go to the East Coast, but it's not gonna last around here. Well, here we are, you know, 50 years later, and it's bigger now than it ever been.
Well, like everybody else, I did it because it's fun, you know, and the enigma of surfers being potheads and all that. I mean, there's potheads in every aspect of life. It's just got branded into everybody's brain about being surfers because we're so wild, so carefree. And
then when the hippies came along, it kind of saved the face of surfers, because then all of a sudden, well, you're a surfer. You're doing something. You know, you're not just a lazy, dope-smoking bum that you know, only comes out at night. So in the later 60s, it was basically, there was a new trash pile for the flies to go on to, and they kind of left the surfers alone. We were actually constructive. We were doing things, and that kind of saved our thing. And then as it became cool, because in all teenage things, something that was cool, or like being a rebel, it attracted the girls. When you attracted the girls, you attracted the guys, then more people wanted to get in on that because that was the happening thing.
The surf has changed. It's a lot more choppier. It's really good in the wintertime. And the evolution of the wetsuits helped too. Back then, they were horrible.
When a major hurricane comes through, it deposits sand. It moves the sand. And your favorite spot that's been there, like the cross, gone for many, many years. And then finally, it's been coming back now. But that hurt, you know, it's a moving thing. But that's nature, which is part of surfing, so you deal with it.
It's lost the bigger waves, I think, because of that sandbar. I can't say that enough. We miss it. And I don't know if we'll ever get it back. And even if we did get it back, you know, one hurricane could take it away. And this is why they call it shifting sands.
Now, as we progress through with everybody and all the innovations and modern technology, it's become such a warm feeling in the water. There's many, many, many more herds of surfers out there. And you always think you got a secret break, but here comes 30 kids over the hill, which is good. Bad sometimes too, but it's all part of it.
A lot of people get into it so wholeheartedly, and they want to be kind of like being a musician, a rock star. They want to live that style and all that, and that's great. You got the time, and you can live it and make a living at it, and that's awesome. We did it. To us, it was our plaything. We did it because we loved it. It was fun, and if I could have made a living doing it, I would have done it every day.
It's just been a great thing to be a part of it since I was a kid. You know, I'm 38. I've been surfing for 35 years now, and it's just been really neat.
70 is going to be an easy age to attain, because in June 25th, I will be 70, and I don't see a reason to have to quit. I mean, almost as perfect as you can be for 70. I have no deficits other than the fact that I don't hear well, I don't have any hair. But I still get compliments, and that's another thing. You know, when you get older and you get a good ride, people will tell you. When you're young, it's the heck with you. So there's a little bit, I don't know if it's respect or, you know, or maybe they're just looking out for themselves and happen to see you get a good ride.
I'm 50 years old now. I own 3 restaurants on the beach, which was always a dream for me, but to be able to have my board in the rafters of the place where I work, it's an amazing dream. But I can't imagine not surfing. And I got married late in life. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and just last week I took her out on a board, and she stood up for the first time.
It afforded me to live a lifestyle that I wanted to live. I got to travel all over the world, and you know, I didn't get rich at it. I did it because I loved it, and that's what it is. The love of surfing gets in your blood. It's like a fever. All of us have salt water and sand in our veins.
The culture itself is, to me, if you take it as it is, it's an awesome culture to be in. It's good to teach your kids. They learn a lot about themselves, their abilities. It helps develop them physically, mentally, It builds a good bond with you and your kids. I'd recommend it for anybody.